Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is One Piece Arabasta Saga Drum Island Arc, Episode 79, Ambush, The Blicking, and Wapple the Blink. Episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happened in the episode. So our episode begins where the last one left off, with Chess standing on the water seemingly, and everybody being completely confused as to why exactly or how exactly he's standing there. But in this episode, very quickly, we hear Wapple's voice telling the crew to increase buoyancy, and we see his ship rise up from the ocean, where the ship is then taken over. Sanji, who's in with Nami, is of course feeling the shaking of the ship coming up, so when he eventually leaves to check on what's going on the deck, he finds everybody surrounded by a bunch of guns, and he's asking Luffy what's going on here, and Luffy says their ship is being attacked, and of course Sanji can see that very well for himself. But then Wapple, who comes on and is like, I'm trying to find Drum Island. Do you have an eternal pose or even just a regular log pose? And they, of course, pretend that they don't have a regular log pose, but they've never heard of Drum Island. And ultimately, Wapple then decides that he's going to eat their ship, and he starts eating it, which is highly offensive to Luffy and the rest of the crew. And so that is when they decide to fight back. The Wapple soldiers, of course, start to shoot, but we know that Luffy is immune to bullets. And so the fight ensues. The Straw Hat crew very easily dispatches the lesser fighters, and then Wapple tries to eat Luffy, is very confused about the texture of Luffy, but Luffy's arms were let loose, so he basically bazookas them forward, sending Wapple flying off into the sky, becoming a star, um, which of course leads all of his crew members to, including Chess and Kuro Marimo, to run after him because he cannot swim, so he is going to sink if they don't find him. And as they are leaving, Kuro Marimo tells them to remember him. In fact, he begs them to please remember them, please. And they, of course, are gone. We then move on from the actual crew. Oh, and Vivi comes up when she hears the gunfire and thinks Wapple looks familiar, but it doesn't go beyond that. Then we get to see Smoker and Tashigi, who of course are in the Grand Line, having followed Luffy and his crew, and they pick up some parts of the conversation that Sanji had with Mr. Zero, and the keywords that they pick up are, of course, Mugiwara, which is Straw Hat, um, Princess Vivi, Mr. Zero, and orders in a letter. They have captured Mr. 11, who is tied to their mast, and they trick him into admitting that he receives orders via letter, and that leads them to figure out where Luffy and crew are eventually heading to. Like, they don't know about the detour, but they know that they are going to be going to Arabasta because Vivi is the princess of Arabasta. They know about the criminal organization because of Mr. 11 tied to their mast. And so they set course for Arabasta, putting in to get an eternal pose from the Navy. And then finally we return back to the crew, where there is some wholesome and comedic moments surrounding Luffy being ill, like Luffy thinking she needs to eat meat to get better, or that they should splash water on her to deal with her fever. And the entire crew all sleeping in Nami's room in the middle of the night when she wakes up, because they want to be near her while she is ill, which is very wholesome and adorable. But then they do arrive ultimately at Drum Island, and upon arrival, they are surrounded by the civilians who are all pointing firearms at them and acting hostilely. Vivi, when she tries to intercede, ends up being, well, we hear a bang, and then she starts to fall, and Luffy screams Vivi, implying heavily that she has been shot, but we do not see it on screen, and that's kind of the cliffhanger this episode ends on, is her falling. So now that we've been reminded about what happened in the episode, it's time to rank the episode first on the mostly objective ranking list. followed by the personal ranking list. So that now brings us to our mostly objective ranking list. And first off, we have our single arc supporting character introductions. We have Chess and Kuromarimo, who are the sidekicks and main goons of Wapple. We then get our single arc main character introductions. We have Wapple, who is the one who tries to eat the ship and has a devil fruit power that allows him to eat anything, the Baku Baku no Mi. Then we have Dalton, who is the leader of the civilians who surround the ship and is the one who speaks to the Straw Hat crew when they arrive. Though again, we're left on a cliffhanger, so not much interaction has occurred there yet. And they're worth 2 points each, bringing us up to 6 points. 1 each for Chess and Kuromarimo, and then 2 each for Wapple and Dalton. Then we have the multi-arc supporting character development, which is worth 3 points. And this is Smoker and Tashigi's little update where we find them in the Grand Line, intercepting the message and then heading for Arabasta. And then we have the world building piece, which is worth 4 points, and that's Vivi explaining the weather situations that occur on the Grand Line. So basically, in simplest form, there are 4 types of islands: summer islands, spring islands, autumn islands, winter islands. Each of those islands then have 4 additional seasons of their own, ultimately leading to at least a minimum of 16 seasons between islands. But of course, there are exceptions. Example, Little Garden, which is a prehistoric island, and some other islands that have various different climate situations, and that is explained to be why between islands the weather is so volatile on the Grand Line, because you could go from a summer island directly to a winter island, and in between those 2 islands, those 2 weather patterns will clash, causing, again, a volatile sea. So that is all explained in this episode by Vivi, and that's worth 4 points, which brings us up to about 13 points total. But there was, of course, one negative, and that was minus 2 points, which brings us back down to 11 points. And that was the negative messaging or behavior, which is the destruction of property. Now, you may have noticed I did not add a multi-arc main character development points to this episode for Vivi. The reason is that while it's heavily implied that she has been shot, we don't have that confirmed on screen at this particular time that this episode ends. We basically hear a bang, we see her start to fall, and hear Luffy yell. But we don't know, did she dodge it? Was she actually shot? Did she dodge it? Was she pushed down by somebody like Luffy who saw it coming? Was it blocked? Was it a misfire? Like, we don't have confirmation that she was shot. It's just heavily implied she's shot. So because it's just the implication at this point for the sake of the cliffhanger, I did not feel I wanted to give points for it in this episode. If it's confirmed in the next one, the points will be given there. So overall, final score for this episode is a 11 out of 10, making it a 10 out of 10 on the mostly objective. When more than one episode has the same score on our mostly objective ranking, they are just scored in episode order. So in first place, we have Nami is Sick, Beyond the Snow That Falls on the Ocean. And then we have in second, Ambush, The Blicking, and Wapple the Blick. Personal ranking for this episode, I did find it to be more interesting and entertaining than the last episode. I thought the wholesome scenes, with everybody sleeping in the same room as Nami to keep an eye on her while she's ill, Luffy having no idea how to treat a sick person because he himself doesn't seem to have gotten sick before. There's a running gag in this arc where, Luffy will occasionally just forget the fact that should be cold, so he'll be running around in his like shorts and vest, and then someone will be like, "Aren't you cold?" And he'll like stare at them for a few minutes and then go, "Oh, wait, I am freezing," and then have to get his winter gear on, but it happens multiple times, so that is funny. There is a scene when he is not knowing how to treat a sick person, where he is basically pushed out of the way by Sanji and Vivi, ends up banging into the wall, and then a picture frame falls on his head, which is still in his head later on when everybody's sleeping. That was also funny. So there was comedy in this episode, which I love in these kind of in-between episodes to see a lot of comedy taking place. We, of course, got our foreshadowing and setup with Smoker and Tashigi heading towards Arabasta. So that was good. Wapol is introducing the main villain, and that does give him a reason to recognize the Straw Hats later, so that's why that took place. But I mean, given how easy it was for them to defeat them, I don't even know why they got surrounded in the first place. But the devil fruit power of Wapol is interesting. Not my favorite, to be honest, among the devil fruits that exist in the world. It's one of the ones I do like least. But having said that, overall, I did like the episode. I found it entertaining. There was plot progression taking place, and it was setting up for the future nicely. So I decided to give it ultimately a 7 out of 10, just because for all that it had those factors to it, I wasn't wholly entertained by it, um, which is why it's a 7 and not higher. But that does still put it into first place. So we do have in first Ambush, the Bilking, and Wapol the Bilk, which I don't even know what that means, but I'm sure it might be explained at some point. And then second place, Nami is sick, beyond the snow that falls on the ocean. Bringing us to the saga ranking so far. And on the mostly objective ranking, in first place we have Reverse Mountain Arc, followed by Whiskey Peak Arc, Little Garden Arc, the Kobe and Helmeppo Arc is in fourth, and Drum Island Arc is currently at 20 out of a possible 140. Then on the personal ranking, Reverse Mountain Arc is also in first place, but it is followed by Little Garden Arc, then Whiskey Peak Arc, and the Kobe and Helmeppo Arc is also fourth place on the personal list. Drum Island so far has 12 out of a possible 140, which honestly isn't the strongest start. Bringing us into the final segment of the series ranking so far. And on the East Blue Saga, final score on our mostly objective was 56.25%, and the Arabasta Saga has so far gathered 25 points out of a possible 70. Meanwhile, on the personal ranking, East Blue Saga had a final score of 52.50%, and the Arabasta Saga is at 18 out of a possible 70 points so far. But with that, we have now rewatched and ranked One Piece, Arabasta Saga, Drum Island Arc, Episode 79, Ambush, The Blicking, and Wapol the Blick. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.